Thanks so much. Is this on? Yeah? Good. All right. Good to be with all of you. So tomorrow is the 10-year anniversary of 9/11/2001. And I've been reflecting a lot on what that day means, what that means to our national psyche, what that means to the world we live in, what that means to us as individuals. And I think that that meaning is not a foregone conclusion, and it's not predetermined by anybody else. To some people, perhaps it means the world became more dangerous, more threatening, more terrifying, and the only security and peace comes through armaments, through defense, through protection. In a country that spends almost half the world's military budget, in a country that has a third of the world's prisoners, we may think that our security and our peace depends on the ability to fortress and arm and protect, no matter the cost to anybody else. That's one form of security. But some of us also believe in the resiliency of the human spirit to respond to violence and injustice and terror and horror with something else. Not that we just put ourselves at the effect and play nice and sing kumbaya, but that we stand with dignity and courage and passion and dedication and commitment and integrity for the highest aspirations and possibilities that we can find in each situation we face. Because life brings to all of us an abundance of pain and suffering and trauma and struggle. That's a reality that we all face in this earth. How we respond to it is part of what uniquely makes us and defines us as human beings in this world. We hear a lot about how people who are abused in their childhood go on to abuse other people, their own children. But I think we also need to remember the 2/3 of the people who are abused in their childhoods who do not go on to abuse their children. We also need to remember how many people are choosing to respond to hatred and violence and suffering by trying to bring something else into this world, because we know what it's like to feel pain, to be alone and lost and want to be accepted at any cost. So we reach out. So we build another possibility. So we keep standing for the dignity and the integrity and the courage and the potential that lives in the human spirit. Struggling and broken though we may be, we find our breakthroughs in the midst of those breakdowns. We find our possibilities, sometimes right out of the heart of the pain and struggles that we face. So as I look at 9/11, I look at the resiliency of the human spirit. I look at the potential that we each have to move on from suffering and violence and find another possibility. And that's what I dedicate my life to. Now, peace can be a lot of things to people. It's a big word. And I think that peace and justice and truth and forgiveness are all completely interwoven, inseparable from one another. I also think it's personal, that peace shows up, as I was quoted as saying earlier, in about 7 billion different ways in the human experience. And I want to talk a little bit about my story, because it links to all this. First, a little family history. So my grandfather started Robbins ice cream company. My dad grew up with an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool in the backyard and 31 flavors of ice cream in the freezer. He was groomed to join in the family company, but when he was in his early 20s, he was offered that chance, and he ended up saying no. He did so because he was aware of the realities of hunger in the world and the arms race and the military-industrial complex and the prison-industrial complex, and he felt that his life was about making a difference, not just inventing a 30-second flavor. So he ended up walking away from any access to the family wealth, moving with my mom to British Columbia, where they built a one-room log cabin, grew most of their own food, and lived on less than $500 a year, which was kind of a pendulum swing from a class perspective. So I was born in that cabin to parents who were doing yoga and meditating for hours every day and living very simply and naming their kid Ocean. Then I got a little older, we moved to California. My dad wrote Diet for a New America, which inspired a lot of people to look at their food choices as an opportunity to make a difference in the world. The media started calling him the rebel without a cone. You know, he'd followed his own rocky road. So here I was coming of age, and I wanted to reach out to my generation and make a difference in the world. I started YES when I was 16, and we traveled the country and spoke to students about the environment and reached about 650,000 people around the US. Through all of that, I was passionate about making a difference in the world. About 10 years ago, my wife Michelle and I became parents. And we'd looked at parenting as kind of a strategic social change investment. At least I had. I mean, I figured it was a way to ensure that our legacy lived on another generation. I figured, my grandfather starts this big ice cream company, my dad writes these best-selling books. Here I am, starting a peace rally when I'm 7 and starting an organization when I'm 16. My kids will probably be saving the world by the time they're out of diapers. Well, our children they're twins. They were born prematurely. They have autism. And so right from the outset, we knew something was a little different. And I'll tell you, they might be saving the world by the time they're out of diapers. We don't know because they're still in diapers. So the journey has been very intense to look at what it means to have passion for change and wanting to do big things in the world. And now I'm learning about unconditional love. I'm learning about what it means to love somebody just the way they are. You see, my dad used to tell me when I was little and growing up, he'd say, I'm really proud of all your accomplishments, but I want you to know I would love you just as much if you were autistic. He said that to me many times, and I thought, well, that's very nice, but fortunately we don't have to test your theory, because I'm not. And now my kids are. And we get to find out whether I can love them just as much. Autistic. And we're discovering a program called Sunrise that works with autism in a very interesting way. You see, conventional autism treatment looks at autism, which, by the way, is a dynamic where kids they go exclusive. They go into repetitive behaviors because they're overwhelmed by the world around them, and they're trying to find some security, some safety, and they do that through familiarity. Okay, so conventional autism treatment says, well, if you give them consistent rewards and punishments, you can coax them into certain behaviors. Because the conventional belief is that autism is incurable, so the best you can do is modify behavior. So kids have better manners, but they don't know why. We're taking a different approach. Sunrise is a program that focuses on looking at autistic people and looking at them as whole and complete people who are doing what makes sense to them. They're finding security the only way they know how, which is by tuning out the rest of the world and going into their exclusive behaviors. So we join them with passion and love and interest and curiosity. We go into their world. They show us the door in, and then we show them the door out. Recently, River, my son, was chewing on a Barbie doll's foot. Yeah, the ocean refuses no river. So he was chewing on a Barbie doll's foot, which is something he loves to do. He's got a lot of Barbie dolls. And, we've never really made eye contact for the first 10 years of his life. He never looked in my eyes. That's one of the dynamics with autism. But he was chewing on a Barbie's foot, and instead of being worried about the fact that this plastic was probably from China and what toxic chemicals was he getting exposed to and trying to distract him out of it, or trying to take it away from him, I picked up a Barbie's foot across the room from him, and I started chewing on it. Suddenly, River looked at me. He came out of his exclusive behavior to look at me with the biggest smile I'd ever seen from him. And I could almost hear him thinking, oh my God, there is intelligent life here. He finally figured it out. So he's chewing on this foot, and I'm chewing on this foot, and we're looking in each other's eyes for pretty much the first time in his life. And he's smiling at me, and then he gestures like this for me to come over. See, it turns out his Barbie doll has 2 feet. So he's inviting me to chew on the other foot of his Barbie doll. So I come over, and now we're 3 inches apart, looking in each other's eyes, beaming at each other, chewing on Barbie feet. And we are in contact in a way that we have never been in his life. What does this have to do with peace? Everything. You see, I believe that people do what they do for a reason, whether they're autistic or not. And if we hold them with contempt, we have lost all moral authority in that relationship. If we have curiosity as to why they may be doing what they are doing, thinking the way they are thinking, engaging the way they are engaging, we don't have to like their actions. We don't have to condone their behavior. But if we can hold respect for the reality that it probably makes sense in some way within the worldview that they hold, then we may have the capacity for influence and connection. I believe that our society is profoundly autistic. We are all overwhelmed with enormous amounts of information, stimulation, activity, corporate agendas, commercial agendas, other people's agendas. So much data. So a lot of us narrow our gaze and narrow our focus and tune out most of the world and focus on the things that help us feel comfortable, help us feel secure, help us feel familiar. And in the process, we are often profoundly isolated. I believe that loneliness is one of the most consistent characterizations that you will find in the modern human life. So we need to relearn how to connect with each other, how to build authentic, real relationships across the divides. And yes, we need to learn about unconditional love. So in my own journey, I often have felt frustrated having kids that take so much time and energy when I'm wanting to be out doing big things in the world. I felt like it was a big distraction sometimes from my life's work, and I just wanted to go on. I still feel that way sometimes. But I'm also realizing that it is part of, in fact, central to my life's work. And that what my children are teaching me about peace, about love, about community, is fundamental to what I am here to embody in this world. Buckminster Fuller said, our children are our elders in universe time. They're born into a world more evolved than we can imagine, and we can only glimpse it through their eyes. And sometimes those eyes don't look quite the way we thought they would. And they don't see a world that even makes sense to us. But can we bring some curiosity? Can we become increasingly interested in understanding not just what we know, but also what we don't know, which may be a core part of wisdom. One of the things that I've done a lot of over the years is organize gatherings with young and intergenerational leaders, where we can take off the mask and be real and build partnerships across historic divides and build relationships, build connections that matter. And one of those programs was called a Jam, and it brought together 30 leaders in India back in 2003. One of the people who came to that was Marilee Sanchez. She's from Colombia. Now, Marilee, at the age of 11, was a victim in the brutal civil war that's been going on for decades down there, of the violence. It took the life of her best friend. And she responded to that in time by coming to organize the Children's Peace Movement of Colombia, where kids started signing a petition saying peace should be the first priority of the country. They wound up getting over 2 million children signing this petition. Then this led to a grown-ups peace movement, and peace ended up being put on the ballot in the presidential election. They said peace should be the first priority of the country, and it got 11 million votes, which was more than any presidential candidate in national history. So for her work, she and some of her friends were honored 3 times by being nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. We found her. She came over to India. Her roommate at this gathering of leaders was Felicia, a French philanthropist from one of the wealthier families in the world, who funded helping young social entrepreneurs get good ideas off the ground. A couple days into the jam, Felicia comes over to me and she says, "Marilee's awesome. I'm so happy I'm her roommate." And she said, I asked her what she was going to get for presents for her family back home while she's in India. And she said she didn't have any money for presents for her family. And so I was wondering, could I give you $20 and you give it to her from an anonymous donor? And I said, Felicia, I'm so touched that you want to help her in this way and that you asked and that you care. Can I just ask you why you want it to be anonymous? And Felicia said, well, I'm afraid that if I give her the money, she'll think I'm rich. And if she thinks I'm rich, she'll stop being honest and authentic with me. And she'll start playing for my money. Or I'll be afraid that she's doing that. And then we won't be friends anymore. And I've seen that happen too many times to want to ever let it happen again. And I said, Felicia, I'm so sorry that you've had that experience. And I will respect whatever choice you want to make. But we're at a jam here. We're taking off the mask and being real and building real partnerships. So I want to ask you, what would happen if you went to Marilee and told her everything that you just told me? Well, she ended up doing that, and they talked for hours, and they talked about class and about identity and about their family histories. And they went so much deeper because they took that risk. I was thinking this is a lot of fuss over $20. But of course, it wasn't about $20. It was about how we build real relationships across divides, like race and class and gender and power and religion and nationality that have torn societies and nations and peoples apart for centuries. It was about how we build that truth and that connection. Well, at the end of the jam, Marilee shared that her family had been saving money for years to try to buy their own home, and they were halfway there. They needed about $5,000. They'd gotten halfway. And she'd been uncomfortable coming to this gathering because she felt like it was selfish to let this plane ticket around the world be used for her when it could get her family the rest of the way to buying their home. I just kind of took that information in, and then she said, but I didn't come to this world to buy houses. I came to this world to make a difference for the children, so I'm so glad that I'm here. Then afterwards, 3 weeks later, Marilee's father died in a car accident, and he was the breadwinner for their family. And she wrote to the community, and she shared this tragedy, and people responded with love and prayers and support, and Felicia sent money. Enough to pay for the burial costs, enough for their family to buy a home, and enough for her to keep her work going through a tough time. And I know she never would have done that if they hadn't spent hours talking about $20. But this is how we build trust. This is how we build partnerships so that we can show up for each other with whatever resources we've got in times of need. About 3 months later, a group of 700 rebels with all of their arms came into Bogota and laid down their arms in the capital. And they said, we believe our cause is righteous and just, but the children need peace, and the children have spoken. Now, the Civil War continues, and the violence continues, but so does the peace movement all over the world. People working, loving, dreaming for what can be. And we're all a part of that when we choose to be. Sometimes people ask me, how do you get started? And I say, you know what? I think that you don't have to have a strategic plan and a risk assessment management for the next 1,000 years in order to take a step, and another step, and another step, and we learn as we go. We're going to make mistakes, but if we're paying attention, maybe we'll learn something along the way. So I want to thank you for all of the ways that you show up with courage and love and commitment and conviction to take a stand for the world that you want to help create for you, for your children, for all generations to come. Because somewhere, some way it matters. Dr. King said the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. Well, it doesn't bend all by itself. Let's help bend that arc of history towards the justice that all generations deserve. Thank you.